Okay, folks, it's time to get into my 2025 camera recommendations. Just a reminder, in case you have somehow ended up on this video and didn't know there was one before this, there is a part 1 to this where I go through camera fundamentals, explaining the basics of what's in all the modern cameras these days. And part of this guide as well is this PDF that you can print off that has a lot of the information. So if you want to just sit down and read about things, I have got a lot of information here about the cameras and the brands and my recommendations. And so that comes with this guide as well. But now it is time to get into the recommendations, and I've broken this into a few different sections. And the first thing I want to do is take a look at the major brands. Which system do you want to go into? And there's a lot of different options out there. We'll start with what is the biggest of all the brands, and that is Canon. Now, Canon makes a wide variety of systems, and their main system, that is their primary focus these days, is their full-frame mirrorless system. They have 5 different cameras currently in there. They may have more if you're looking at older discontinued models as well, but they do have 5 different models hitting different price points with different feature sets, and we'll be recommending some of these cameras as we get into the later sections in here. Now, they also make some that are mirrorless, but with a crop frame sensor. Now, they have the same lens mount, and so you can share lenses to some degree back and forth. There are some limitations, which we're not going to get into right now, but the crop frame lenses can use all of the available RF lenses. Now, it's kind of weird right now, but there is a parallel universe where Canon makes a different crop frame mirrorless camera that has nothing to do with the R cameras. And so the M camera is a mirrorless mount that they were experimenting with for a while, and it appears that they have abandoned it. They haven't completely discontinued it. There's not much available in the way of lenses and cameras, but technically it's a mirrorless camera. It uses a 1.6 crop, but it is very different than the RF mount being used on their mainstream mirrorless cameras. Now, I'm still including this just because there are so many out there. Canon does still have DSLRs available for sale. Notice I didn't say making them. I'm not sure if they're making them. It's possible they are. They may just have a lot of stock that they're trying to get rid of. But their big business for Canon for many, many years was single lens reflex cameras and then digital single lens reflex cameras. And they have a few models left from that. They haven't produced any new cameras in the last 4 years, so it's kind of clear that they've abandoned making the SLRs. Now, they do also have some crop frame SLRs as well. Once again, this is pretty much all old stock at this point. You'll find these around. And first off, I do want to say that SLRs can take great photos. I've used them for many, many years. Pretty much everyone who has been into photography for the last decade has used DSLRs, and they have taken many of the world's greatest photos. But it's not being supported with new lenses, new cameras, new equipment, and so everything is just moving on. The whole industry is transitioning to mirrorless, and it is pretty much completely done in that regard. And so DSLRs are still hanging on in a few corners, back shelves of the camera stores and so forth. And so they exist. Be aware that they're out there, but Canon is fully focused on their new RF mount, mostly on their full frame. They have some great options out there that are available for beginning photographers to professional photographers, and we'll look more at those cameras as we get into the recommendations. Their longtime rival is Nikon, who, like Canon, is now focused on full-frame mirrorless cameras. They have a number of models available, once again, from low-end to professional. They are equally as good as the Canons, in my opinion. They're slightly different compromises between one and the other, and so which one is better? Well, it depends on exactly which camera you're comparing and what's it going to be used for as to which one might be best. It varies a bit in there. But overall, it's a very, very good system, very complete system that has both entry-level equipment and professional equipment. And like Canon, they also make some crop frame mirrorless versions that are available. Now, both Canon and Nikon do not have a lot of crop frame options available in cameras, and especially so in lenses. And so if you were wanting to do something particular with lenses in the crop frame category with Nikon or Canon, you often have to look to their full frame lenses. And so I think they're going to keep these going for a while. And if you had to ask me, what is the future going to look like? It's going to be full frame. They're going to keep these around for as long as they make some sales. They're not pushing new cameras, they're not pushing new lenses, and they're steering everybody towards full frame. And also, like Canon, they do have a lot of DSLRs that are still available. I don't know if they're making them. They haven't introduced anything new in about 4 years in bodies or lenses. So they do have a few options available. If somebody does want to get into a DSLR camera, if you're just trying to, replace a DSLR camera and you've already got a set of lenses, then it makes sense just getting another DSLR camera while you can, if you want to make use of that system. But they are focused clearly on mirrorless going forward. They do have a crop frame camera still available. Depending on what retailer you go to, you might find some other models available in the DSLR crop frame. But once again, nothing new in the last several years. They've clearly moved on to be fully with mirrorless. But Nikon was the brand that I started with. I think they're fantastic. They really made a lot of great stuff for professionals, but as well as many other people. So Canon and Nikon for a long time were the two main options available. And then Sony came along and shook things up a little bit and really brought forth some great technology. And so they did have some DSLRs, and they are fully gone at this point. They are fully looking at mirrorless. They started with crop frame, and that's where they first started growing their mirrorless business. And then in 2013, they moved on to full frame, and that is where they have been really focused lately. So in the crop frame, Sony's got a lot of options there, but some of them are getting a little bit older because it's not getting the love that the full frame gets. Now, the full frame system with Sony is a little bit different than Nikon and Canon, in my opinion. Usually with Nikon and Canon, you have higher end and middle end and lower end models, and it's more of a ladder type sequence. With Sony, they have high-end cameras for sports photography, high-end cameras for landscape or portrait photography, high-end cameras for video, and so they kind of specialize in different areas. The Sony a7 IV is their most generic, basic camera that they have, but everything else kind of fits into a special niche category of doing something particularly good. I guess the A1 Mark II might be kind of the opposite end, where it's a high-end camera that's really designed for doing everything good. But they have a lot of different lenses available. And so because they got into mirrorless before Canon and Nikon, they were able to develop a lens lineup that Canon and Nikon are trying to catch up to. So while Canon and Nikon were kind of, miles ahead of Sony for a long time, Sony kind of went a different route and got a lot of ground ahead by focusing on mirrorless a long time ago. And so they have the largest collection of lenses available. And so there's a good reason to choose Sony when it simply comes to the available choice of lenses and camera bodies. It's kind of the biggest system out there. And so that's got a lot of benefits to it. Next up is Fujifilm, and Fuji is one of my favorite companies because they do things just a little bit differently. So they focused on mirrorless in the crop frame department. And if you wanted to get a mirrorless crop frame camera, generally speaking, Fuji would be my number one choice. And that is because this is really what their main gig was for a long time. And so they've got a lot of cameras, they've got a lot of lenses, they've really fleshed out the whole lineup here. A very good system. Now, they did somewhat recently start making medium format, and they decided not to compete with Sony, Canon, and Nikon in full frame. It was a very crowded market. Yes, it's a very big market. That's where a lot of photographers are, and they decided to take a step over because neither Canon, Nikon, or Sony make a medium format camera. And now Fuji makes the best medium format system in the business. And so if you want a camera that's medium format, generally I would recommend a Fuji camera. If you want a crop frame camera, I would generally recommend a Fuji camera for that as well. And that is because Fuji really focuses on these two, and all the other manufacturers focus on full frame, and then they also dabble in another market, you might say. And so this is where you're going to find some very good product and a good collection of product as well. All right, OM System, which was formerly Olympus. Olympus sold off the imaging division. It became OM System a few years back. And OM System are fully focused on the 4/3 system. And so when the age of digital came around, Olympus decided, we couldn't compete with the Nikons and the Canons, which were dominant at the time. Let's do something notably different. And they decided to go with a smaller size sensor, which enabled them to do some different things with the camera. And it enables the camera to work with long lenses very well. So if you do sports or bird photography, a lot of photographers like Olympus cameras because you can just do a lot with a really small package. They've also been very good with kind of very advanced technology. And so they're some of the first cameras to get new features in them. And they're generally very small, robust cameras. So for travel or adventure photography, you'll see that I recommend Olympus cameras for that because they do that very well. And so if you're looking for something smaller, something a little different, OM System has some interesting choices there. Panasonic is another name that really wasn't involved back in the film days, but they got involved when it got to digital because they have a large experience with video. And so one of the things about Panasonic is anyone who's interested in video probably going to want to look at Panasonic cameras. Now, there's a lot of other good options with Canon and Sony and Nikon and so forth when it comes to video, but Panasonic has a long history in it. And they focused on the Micro Four Thirds system, as did Olympus and now OM System did. And so they really fleshed out a lot of lenses. And there is interchangeable lenses between Panasonic and Olympus, which is really nice. Sometimes you want to stay with the name brand to get 100% compatibility, but generally there's a lot of options out there because they opened up the lens mount, unlike some other manufacturers, and they allowed third parties to make lenses for this Micro Four Thirds system. They decided, well, that wasn't good enough for them. They wanted to go full frame as well. And so several years later, they introduced full frame. And then the whole research and development department, as well as manufacturing, got split as far as how often are lenses and cameras coming out. And so Panasonic has been a little bit on the quiet side of the last few years. We haven't seen a lot of new, exciting products from them. We've seen some, just not a lot of exciting new products. But if you're more of a hybrid shooter, which means you're shooting stills and videos, Panasonic is a good route to look at, both with their Micro Four Thirds as well as their full frame system. Now, if you're new to Leica, well, all I can say is things are different here. We're in a German manufacturing company that's been around for more than 100 years. Pretty much all the other brands that we've talked about are Japanese-based. Leica has a long history of film cameras, and they've made the transition successfully to digital. They still make film cameras. They make digital rangefinder and film rangefinder cameras that share a common mount. So if somebody wanted to go back and forth between digital and film with modern cameras and modern lenses, well, Leica is really the only way to do that. Now, they have gone with a new mirrorless system as well. They don't have as many lenses and as many cameras, but boy, are they really nice systems out there. Not a huge collection, but very good quality for sure. Now, they've also made medium format. Now, I'm not even sure I should be listing this. That's because it's getting kind of old and they really haven't done many updates and they haven't come out with new lenses. And I'm not even completely sure if this might be discontinued at this time. But they've experimented in a lot of very high-end products. And so these are definitely not cheap products here, but they are very nice products. They are well made. They have a particular style to them and they fit some people's needs very, very well. Now, Pentax, which has been purchased by Ricoh, so that's kind of the operating company, is a company that has a long history in photography. They've made a lot of great single lens reflex cameras back in the film days. They made a lot of very good digital cameras. And when this whole new mirrorless thing came along, I don't know that they had the money to go into the research and development and come out with it. So they said, we're just sticking with DSLRs. And they have kind of shrunk in size and definitely in presence in the market. And so you don't see a lot of Pentax cameras. They make some very nice things, but they don't come out with very new cameras very often, and they don't come out with new lenses very often either. They do just dabble in full frame. They've got a number of crop frame, and it's kind of real hit and miss from them. I would never recommend Pentax to a new photographer. There's just not the support system. It's not that it's not good equipment. It's just not very common equipment. And so It's okay to keep it going if you're used to using it, not a great first step. Hasselblad has a long history in photography. They were, I believe, the first camera on the moon. This is what a lot of professionals used over many years, and they've been trying to keep up with the digital game. And so their latest camera, the X2D 100C, is a very nice, very capable camera. Not a huge collection of lenses, but a pretty good option. Has really kind of changed the style of shooting from what Hasselblads have been in the past. They do have some special offerings from time to time. Very high-end equipment, of course, with the medium format. They were working with DSLRs, and technically you can still find them available. They are getting much older at this time. This is what some high-end commercial photographers used. Chances are you'll know if you're interested in Hasselblad, not your first step in photography. Now, each of the different camera and lens options out there has its own ecosystem that you're going to be living within. And I wanted to try to do some sort of comparison between, forget the camera or the specific lens that you're going to get, which system do you want to be a part of? And what I think is important is popularity. This is where there is lots of new products available, but also used products available, because used is a great way to get into cameras and lenses at a more affordable price. And so something that's more popular is going to have more options out there for you to get your hands on. Now, with camera bodies, I want to know what's available currently new, because I'd like to buy new if I can, and where are they going? Are they going to be coming out with new cameras in the future? Now, all of the camera manufacturers are very mum about any new camera coming out, unless it is done and ready to go and they're ready for the launch. But you can kind of tell the direction of a company by what they've been doing over the last few years. Lenses are very important. This is where a lot of photographers have their greatest investment, is in lenses, not in cameras. They might have 1 or 2 cameras, very rarely more than that, but it's a great number of lenses is where the versatility comes from. So what's available currently? What's been available that I can still get my hands on the used market? What are they likely to make down the future? And what are the aftermarket manufacturers making? And so thinking about all of these things, I wanted to compare some of the largest systems out there and try to rank them in my own way. Now, it's going to be a compromise. You might rank them a little differently than I would, but I decided to kind of put a point system together and rank them, and this is the way that it comes out. And so I'm broadly breaking these into 3 categories: weak, medium, and strong systems. And I'm not going to say that it's wrong to go with something in the weak category. It's just be aware of what you're getting yourself involved in. I've got cameras in the weak category myself, and I understand that, and that's just part of the compromise of where they are. But if you want to have a photography system that has a robust option of cameras and lenses, well, you're going to want to look probably in the strong category. Now, the score that I gave them is here, and how did I figure out this score? Well, I did it in a very analytical way. I looked at how many new cameras they've introduced over the last 4 years. 4 years is about how long a camera can go while you still consider it a current camera. It's still a viable camera that works after 4 years, but as far as kind of a current up-to-date camera, every 4 years, I would say, is what we're looking at here. And so I gave it 50 points for every camera that it came out with over the last 4 years. That was a unique and distinctive camera, not something that was very slight iteration on something else that it was doing. And for every lens that it came out with over the last 4 years, I'm going to give it 20 points. Now, I suppose I maybe could have gone longer in the number of years because lenses tend to stick around for 5 to 10 years before they get replaced with subsequent models. But it gives you an idea of, are they making lots of lenses for it? But also I wanted to take into account the aftermarket lenses that are available. And so I just went on to a popular online retailer and I just looked up a particular mount and wanted to look at how many different lenses are available for a particular mount. And they got 1 point for every lens that was available, whether they made it or somebody else made it. And so when you add all these up, that's how I got to this final score. Now, I wanted to look at how it compared to last year when I also did this rating system. And you could see, generally speaking, the medium and strong companies are just getting stronger. They're doing well, and the weaker companies are falling further behind. Once again, nothing particularly wrong with a camera or lens from a weaker system. It's just it doesn't have that same support system, the available repair and rental. You need a new lens while you're on vacation and you pop into a camera store in a foreign country. Are they going to carry what you want? And it's really handy to have something that's very common, whether you need a battery, a lens, or a new camera. All right, it is time to get finally into the camera recommendations. And what we're going to do is I'm going to recommend top 3 different cameras for each of these different categories. Now I have given them little ribbons to let you know who's first place, second place, and third place. And in many cases, it's an essential tie. And it's only because I felt obligated to give one of them a first and a second. And the actual difference may be completely negligible. And it may be different for you because you may value one thing differently than I do. And so this is a very, very light recommendation when it comes to one camera over the other. It's more like these are 3 cameras that are great for this particular concept. So we'll start with a budget beginner. So you're trying to keep the price as low as possible, but you want to get into photography. Nikon Z52, it's a modern camera. It gives you lots of features. It's easy to work with. And the Nikon mirrorless system is pretty well established at this point, and it is continuing to grow. The Sony a6100 is going to be one of the most affordable cameras that you can get, and it's got the largest collection of lenses. Because Sony's been around for a long time with that particular lens mount, there's just lots of options from Sony and other manufacturers in there. It's also going to be the smallest of the 3 options, and so for travel or packing it, it's going to be a great choice. My number 1 choice is the Canon R100. It's actually pretty similar to the Nikon Z50 in the features that you're going to get from it. It's not a remarkable camera, but it's just a good basic camera. And Canon is the largest manufacturer of cameras and lenses out there, so it gets you part of the largest system. So it's a great direction to go because you're going to have lots of options down the road in that growing system. And so I think any of these would be a really good budget beginner system. The reason I gave the Canon R1 is partly because it's part of the biggest system. And well, Canon, to be honest, they took a lot of features out of this camera from some of their other cameras, and they're bringing it in at a really, really low price point. This is about half the price of some of the other models here. And so you can get into it at a very, very affordable price, and it's a good system. Just be aware that when you want lenses down the road, a lot of the lenses are going to cost quite a bit more than the camera does. All right, let's say you're a beginner, but you've got just a little bit more of a budget. With Sony, the a6400 is a higher end version of the 6100 we were just talking about, a very established system, a very small camera. All right, Nikon Z5, I'm going to go for full frame here so that if you are a beginner and you do want to get into a full frame system, this is going to be a relatively affordable way of getting into it. The Canon R8 is also a full frame option. It's going to be a bit more money than the a6400, but once again gets you into the largest system out there, Canon. This is where it's going to offer you a lot of growth potential down the road. All of these are 3 very good cameras. They're all capable of turning out very good images. There are a lot of lenses available for the Sony a6400. You'll be a little bit more limited in the selection, and the price can get a bit more with the Nikons and the Canons, but I think down the road you're going to see a lot of different options available. All right, let's say you want to get into photography. Maybe you're upgrading, you want to get a full frame camera, and you don't want to do anything particular. You just kind of want to do a little bit of everything. And so this standard full frame camera is maybe the most versatile use cameras that you can get. We're going to see these recommended in future sections because these are just good general cameras for a wide variety of purposes. All right, the Sony a7 Mark IV. This is part of the very large Sony system, so there's a lot of name brand Sony lenses that are available. It's going to be the highest megapixel of the group that I'm going to recommend here. And so if you want just a little bit more resolution, maybe you're doing portrait photography or landscape photography, that would make this one particularly good. The Canon R6 Mark II. This is just where Canon makes a really great camera with a lot of great features. It's just a really, really well-refined camera. It feels good in the hand. The menus work easily. There's a great collection of lenses available for it. It's just a great standard camera. My number 1 pick, and maybe that's just because it's a little bit newer than the other ones, at least right now, is Nikon Z6 Mark III. So obviously this is the third version of this particular camera. This is kind of the middle of the bell curve, you might say, with Nikon. It's also, like the Canon R6 Mark II, part of the growing system with Nikon. It's very good both in video and in stills, and there's a nice collection of great lenses that are growing with it. It's a virtual tie between all three of these, and so any of them I think would be great choices to make if you are wanting to upgrade or really get into photography, but you want to go with full frame and just get a good basic camera. All right, now let's say you want to do sports and wildlife and you're thinking about going with a crop frame camera because that's going to make the lenses a little bit more affordable and doable, you might say. You don't need as long a lens out there. Fujifilm makes an X-H2S. Now this is their kind of high-speed camera that is very good at fast focusing and fast shooting. Fuji's come out with a lot of very good telephoto lenses recently. Remember, they specialize in crop frame, and so there's going to be a lot of options available. Now, Canon doesn't have a lot of crop frame cameras, but the R7 is their best camera in this category. I've used this one myself quite a bit. And this is offering 32 megapixels, so it's a little bit more than the 26 by Fuji. And there are a lot of good lenses from Canon that you can put this on. Some of them are kind of on the pricey side, I will have to admit, but there's a good collection of pro lenses with the Canon system. Now, the Olympus OM1 is a very good camera. And this camera from Olympus also has a lot of very good telephoto lens options available. And so if you wanted to get into bird photography or really specialize in wildlife, especially small wildlife, boy, the camera system is going to be smaller and lighter with this system. And you're going to get great image quality. Now, if you're shooting at dusk and dawn and you really like shooting with low light, you might want to look at some of the full frame systems we'll talk about here in a minute. But for normal daylight operations, the OM system, OM1 Mark II, is a fantastic camera. All right, next up, let's say you want to do sports and wildlife, but you want to go full frame here. So Canon R5 Mark II gets you 45 megapixels and gets you into a system that's large, growing, and has a number of great telephoto lenses. The Sony A1 Mark II gets you 50 megapixels and gets you into a very well-established system. Once again, large collection of lenses, some very good telephoto lenses. My pick here is the Nikon Z8. And it's not really because the Z8 is any better than the A1 Mark II or the R5 Mark II. I think they're all three very good cameras. Some are slightly better in one category than the other. I just like the Nikon lenses that are available right now in the telephoto range. They have some really good options. Some very good options if you have a huge budget, and then some good options if you have a pretty good budget. And so there's some very interesting options available for all three of these, but I really like the lens options that are available for the Nikon camera. And I know if you're new to photography, it seems strange I'm choosing a camera for the lenses available, not the camera itself. Well, you're going to end up having those lenses longer than you have the camera in most cases. And so the lens selection is a really important choice. All right, now let's just say you are a professional sports photographer. You probably don't need me telling you which camera system to buy, but just in case you're interested in what the pros are going to shoot, if you're with the Nikon system, you're going to get the Z9. It's a full frame camera, which means you can hold it vertically or horizontally, and you do a lot of vertical shooting in sports, so that makes it very handy to work with. It can work with 45 megapixels, which is more than you really need in many sporting situations, but if you want to, you can. And still work at 20 frames per second, which makes that a very special camera. Sony makes a specialized sports camera, the A9 series, the A9 Mark III. Granted, it's only got 24 megapixels, but that's more than enough for most sports photographers. But it can fire at up to 120 frames per second. And once again, Sony's got a great collection of lenses that have been around for quite some time. Now, the latest camera to come out in this field is the Canon R1. Now, Canon has specialized in sports photography for a long time, and having a premier flagship camera has been very important to them. So they've got a great collection currently of professional sports lenses, and you know they're going to have some more coming down the road. We can shoot up to 40 frames per second with this. Granted, it is only 24 megapixels, but that is generally more than enough for most sports photographers, and it's got the best focusing and tracking of any camera on the market right now. Your success in sports photography is not going to be determined by which one of these three cameras you choose. This is most likely the one that you end up with because that's the system you like to be in. And currently these days, if you wanted to get professional quality sports photos, you could go with any 3 systems, go with these cameras, and you're going to end up with tons of great images. All right, let's talk about nature and landscape. This is where high resolution and maybe a smaller camera size is more important. Nikon Z8 is a popular choice here. 45 megapixels, well-built camera, lots of lens options, great choice. Canon R5 Mark II fits very much into that same category, just a little bit smaller in size, which I like, but very comparable between both of these. If you want a little bit more resolution, Sony has the A7R Mark V. R stands for resolution, so you can get up to 60 megapixels, and that's the only camera in the market that gets up there. And I give it that first place just because it's got that extra notch. To be truthful, there's not that much difference between 45 and 60 megapixels. I know you can do the math and figure it out, but when it comes to real world, looking at the images, these are all going to be really, really good choices that you can make very big enlargements from. Our next category is portraits, and this is pretty similar to the same cameras that we just talked about before, but we want to think about what lenses are available for the portrait photographer. So the Sony A7R V gives you great sharpness with that 60 megapixels. They've got a number of very good portrait lenses, some very fast lenses if you want shallow depth of field. We're going to see a reappearance of the Nikon Z8 for all the same reasons again. Lots of resolution, lots of good portrait lenses. But you know what? Canon's just got a few extra special portrait lenses, so I'm giving it the slight nod here. I think, once again, it's a virtual tie between all 3 of these when it comes to portrait photography. All right, for wedding and events, we may not need all that resolution. You end up shooting a lot of photos. Rarely do these things get enlarged. It's quite possible a wedding photographer would have one camera that kind of specializes for very high-end portraits that's going to do the enlargements. But when it comes to the actual event of the wedding, they need more of a kind of a regular go-to camera that maybe they're going to be shooting with 2 cameras. They're going to be shooting through lots of images. They just need a good all-around full-frame camera. And so here's where we see those good general all-around cameras that we've talked about before. The Nikon Z6 III, 24 megapixels, and has all the basic bells and whistles that you're going to need from a modern camera. The Sony A7 Mark IV gives you a little bit more resolution, but once again, all the basic good features that you need, just like in the Canon R6 Mark II. These are just great cameras across the board for a wide variety of purposes. Maybe you're shooting stills and video. Yes, these all shoot video quite well with fairly high resolution and good support on their additional features that they have. All right, let's say you're more interested in shooting basic video. Maybe you're a YouTuber or you need to film video of yourself for whatever reason that you might need, and you've come to still photography cameras because you've seen there's a lot of good options out there. So many of the manufacturers make cameras that are a little bit more designed for video and less so for stills. And the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II doesn't have a traditional standard viewfinder, which just makes it terrible for still photography in my opinion, but for video, it works really nice. It's compact, it's got a little fuzzy mic that it comes with it for better quality audio, and there's a lot of lens choices that are available. Nikon kind of wanted to mimic this, so they made their own Z30. It's not my favorite stills camera out there, but if you just wanted to shoot basic video, well, yeah, they've got pretty good video and some decent lenses that you can get with this. There's not a lot of lenses, and that's kind of, major problem with that, but it's part of a system that you might want to get into. The Sony ZV-E1 is the full frame sensor version, and so this is going to allow you to work under lower light, shoot with shallower depth of field, but it is kind of a video specific camera. Now, these are not what I would call high-end. I specifically called it basic video, but these all have some flip out screens that can help you. They have all the right video modes and settings in order to shoot good quality basic video. And so they're not great for stills photography, so they're not my favorite in that category, but in this category, well, that's what they made them for, and that's what they specialize in. Now, if you want to shoot more professional quality video, number one, go get a professional video camera, but if you do want to do it with a stills camera, the Panasonic GH7 is one of their more video-specific cameras. Granted, everything Panasonic does is with a lot of finesse when it comes to video work, but the GH7 is a great one if you're interested in the Micro Four Thirds system. A lot of lenses available, great options on the camera. Once again, Panasonic again, but this time we're going full frame. And so if you like the GH7, but you want a full frame version of it, it does mean bigger, slightly more expensive lenses. You are going to get into a little bit higher end product here. And so if you want full frame, that is a good option. I also like the Sony a7S. The S is the video series from Sony, and this is the Mark III version of it. Once again, full frame sensor, lots of video options. You're going to be able to get great video from any one of these cameras. There's lots of support system out there for it, whether you need cages or extra lenses or audio gear. These all have the right types of inputs and outputs that make shooting professional quality video a little bit easier to do. One of my favorite types of photography is travel photography. And the big thing with travel is weight and size. Sony makes a special compact series of cameras, the A7C. This is the R model of it, which has 61 megapixels. So it gives you fantastic resolution in a really small size camera. Now, Sony does make a wide variety of lenses, and some of them are larger and some of them are smaller. And so you might want to look at some of those smaller size lenses. It makes it a little bit more appropriate on this particular camera. Now I'm going to pull off a full frame camera here, a Canon R5 Mark II. There's a lot of other cameras we could put in here, but this one I think works well. Canon's a very popular system, lots of lenses, lots of choices. It's just a good general high resolution full frame camera, which is what often many travel photographers would want. Professional travel photographer, I'd probably choose the R5 Mark II as my first choice. But just kind of from a personal travel standpoint, I'd like to have something a little bit smaller. And this is where the Fuji X-T5 and its crop frame sensor come in. They've got some fantastic, little bit smaller lenses, and this is a fun, traditional style camera with a lot of dials and knobs on it, which is just enjoyable to use. And so this is my favorite when it comes to travel photography. Now, adventure is kind of like travel, but throw in more rain, snow, and other problems. So these are cameras that are all pretty durable cameras. Once again, we're seeing the Sony a7CR, which is their compact 61 megapixel camera. And this is something that can fit into really small bags and cases. The weather sealing on this is not as good as some of the other cameras I'm going to talk about, but it's so small, you can pack it a little bit more easily. We're going to see the X-T5 again. It's a great adventure camera. It's physically well protected from rain, wind, dust, things like that, and a lot of good lenses that are also weather protected. But I'm going to come back to the Olympus OM1 Mark II here. This is probably the best weather sealed camera out there. The smaller sensor on this means that the lenses are going to be smaller in size, and that just makes it easier to carry. Great image stabilization on it as well, which means you may not need to bring a tripod with you everywhere that you go. And so all of these are great cameras. Once again, small trade-offs between each one. All right, for our final category, let's talk about medium format. With medium format, we're not going to be specializing in anything particular. We're just doing medium format. Hasselblad, long-term name in the medium format world, the X2D100C is their most supported camera, you might say, at the time. This is the one that they're making lots of lenses for. It is the most versatile. It is still kind of niche in how you might use it because it's not great for bird photography or sports photography with the available lenses and the way that it shoots. But in what it does, it's an enjoyable camera to use. Now, Fuji has really taken over the medium format space. And if you want to go medium format, my first word is Fujifilm. And the GFX 100S, the second, is kind of the more affordable option of getting into a 100 megapixel sensor. And we've got a lot of people out there who have purchased this one. It came out relatively recently, and a lot of people who are kind of experimenting and playing with medium format are really enjoying this camera, and is probably the best value of anyone on this page here. But the best one is the GFX 100 the second. This is a higher end version, and it's got a bit more in the way of features and capability. Uses the same good collection of Fuji lenses that is available out there that has been growing, and more lenses have been coming into the fray. They've got some telephoto lenses and tilt shift lenses. So they've got some very good, interesting options there. And so those are some of the best medium format cameras. Well, folks, there you go. Those are my recommendations. Before I sign off here, I'll just let you know that if you have bought a modern camera, there is a good chance that I have a complete camera guide which takes you through all the buttons and all the dials and all of the operation of that camera. I also have a number of lens guides as well as a number of other photography classes. And so if you want to learn more, check out my site at johngreengo.com, and I've got lots of courses there for you. Well, folks, there you go. That is my 2025 camera buyer's guide. I hope you have picked up some more information to help you make the right choice. As you can see, I am independent. I don't get any benefit of you buying or not buying a camera. I just want to see you make a smart choice in what camera you do get. And you can take it, my recommendations, as just a starting point. That doesn't mean that they're the only cameras that are good for a particular thing that you want to do. You want to figure out what's right for you, and you want to get the camera that you're going to be happy with. And as long as you do that, then you're going to have the right camera. So I wish you the best of luck in any sort of camera choice, and I hope to see you again in the future. Take care.